Alrighty, welcome everybody to the end of our, third week, Leviticus. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. If you've made it this far, there's a good chance you're going to make it the rest of the way. This is kind of the part of the Bible where, you hit the end of Exodus, you're learning the tabernacle, oh, this is getting a little bit difficult. You hit Leviticus, and it's like, oh my word. I know it's hard for me to read those parts of the Bible because my brain definitely works best with narrative. And once you hit Leviticus, the narrative kind of comes to a halt. You've been in Genesis, time is flowing, stories, all these sorts of people. That was all narrative. You hit Exodus, good narrative up until halfway, and then it starts to give some laws, but it's not overwhelming. But then Leviticus is like, we are stuck here at the mountain. Here's a whole bunch of laws, specifically around how the priesthood works and all this. And it's just like all the sacrifices. And you're just like, what am I reading? So I'm going to talk about how I approached this book, what I got out of it. And I did get a lot out of it. So I'm going to share the process that I did, who you might connect with. So if you kind of were going through Leviticus and it was just you're struggling through it, I'm not getting much, I'll give you my recommendation for how you could approach numbers, so that way you maybe get more out of numbers. But I did get quite a bit out of this one. It's still not an easy read, but at least while I'm reading it, it's like I kind of have a bigger picture in mind. So to start with, I actually wanted to read a bit of Leviticus. I think it's actually pretty good if you start at the very end of Leviticus in chapter 26. If you read that first, and then you start back at the beginning, or at least keep this in your mind as you read it, it kind of helps flush out the story. So this is Leviticus 26, and then starting in verse 3. So I'll just read this and then just kind of keep in mind, like, if they followed these rules, think about how it would be living there if they got this blessing. So, if you follow my statutes and faithfully observe my commands, I will give you rain at the right time, and the land will yield its produce, and the trees of the field will bear their fruit. Your threshing will continue until grape harvest, and the grape harvest will continue until sowing time. You will have plenty of food to eat and live securely in your land. I will give peace to the land, and you will lie down with nothing to frighten you. I will remove dangerous animals from the land, and no sword will pass through your land. You will pursue your enemies, and they will fall before you by the sword. 5 of you will pursue 100, and 100 of you will pursue 10,000. Your enemies will fall before you by the sword. I will turn to you, make you fruitful, and multiply you, and confirm my covenant with you. You will eat the old grain of the previous year, and will clear out the old to make room for the new. I will place my residence among you, and I will not reject you. I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, so that you would no longer be their slaves. I broke the bars of your yoke and enabled you to live in freedom. So you could imagine if the Israelites, you get through all this story, you hear all the laws, and they all go, yeah, okay, let's follow all those rules. That's the sort of life that they could live, in close proximity to God, secure, not having to live in fear of your enemies, the land producing exactly what you need. And there's other bits in there as well for, like, you've got the year of Jubilee, which is like, oh, you won't work the land. Well, it even has a bit in there where it's like, don't worry, you'll have threefold harvest that year before, and you'll be eating off of that until you plant and harvest the next time. So, totally cool. And so if you kind of have that in mind when you read through Leviticus, you can kind of go, okay, so if they are following these rules, this is the promise that God has set. Now, unfortunately, the next verse is, but if you don't obey me and observe all these commands, and then it kind of turns dark. We won't read that one on the podcast. It's too sad, and it's kind of what ends up happening. So, but very cool, and kind of also gives you a glimpse of, like, what life will be like when Jesus returns, and just kind of that picture, which is pretty cool. So now, unfortunately, that's at the end of Leviticus, so you've had to read through everything to get to there and be like, oh. But, as part of our journey through this, we actually read it twice, or that's at least one of the goals. I've hit that. It's not an easy thing to do. I always have 2 days out of the week where it's just like power read. So actually, when I record these, I'm actually already halfway through the next book because I've had to get halfway through so I can read it in 2 days, and then the rest of the week I read a bit less. But so Leviticus, if you kind of keep that in mind, I think that helps you in the right mindset. But there's still a lot of laws about skin disease, bodily fluids, sacrifices. It's a lot. So if you struggled in this one and you are wondering, okay, how do I read this and get more out of it? Or moving forward, if I reach other books of the Bible that are difficult to read, what are my strategies to help me read? One would be to, as you read, you're trying to look for pictures of Christ. So as you go through some of the sacrifices, especially like the Day of Atonement, that's the one with the 2 goats, one gets sacrificed, the other gets sent out. You could start to reflect, how does this picture Christ? And Christ actually represents both of those goats, in that one is claimed as innocent and given up to God, and then the other, the sins are put upon and it's sent out of the camp, just as the same as our sins were put upon Jesus and he was sent out of Jerusalem up onto the hill to die. So like you could look at these stories and these practices and then kind of push that forward and be like, oh my goodness, this is how it points to Christ, which can make it a bit more, it can connect it more to you and how you approach the Bible. That is one thing that you can do. It's not the case in all of these that you can do, but that is one. And then the second would be to find yourself a good resource that helps to explain the overall and larger structures going on. I mentioned this, I think I've mentioned it every week, but I've mentioned it this past week, that a really, really good resource for this is the Bible Project. Their videos I've been using, they have one for each book of the Bible that helps you kind of structure in your mind, all right, this is the kind of what I'm about to read. But they actually have a podcast series. They spent like a whole year on the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And so they have 9 to 12 episodes per book. So they had 9 episodes on Leviticus plus a Q&A. So I listened to those 9 episodes as I was reading. Now, I had listened to those episodes a year or 2 ago, and I thought it was really interesting. But listening to them while actually reading Leviticus helped so much more. And so as I'm reading through Leviticus, yes, there are still challenging parts to read through, but I'm able to plug them into these larger narrative structures that are going on, and it like made my reading a lot easier to do kind of with that structure in mind. I kind of had places to put all these different stories. So I'll briefly highlight kind of the stories, kind of the story being told, even though it doesn't seem like there's much narrative going on, the whole book works as a narrative. At the end of Exodus, I'll go back to Exodus 40. All right, so verse 34. So Exodus 40, verse 34. So they set up the tent. God's glory comes in. The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses was unable to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud rested on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So there's this little line at the end of Exodus that's like, all right, God came down, hooray! Moses can't go into the tent. And you're like, wait, what? Wasn't he able to communicate with him? Why can't he go into the tent? So there's this, it ends in Exodus with this kind of like, that's a problem. And then you go through Leviticus with all these laws for how the Israelites and the priest and everything can be purified, forgiveness of sins. and all of that. And so there's some ups and downs, but you kind of get the idea that in Leviticus, if these things are being followed, then things can be made right with God. And then you get to the first part of Numbers. So the Lord spoke to Moses. So this is 1:1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the wilderness of Sinai. So you finish the book of Leviticus, the next book starts, and now God is speaking to Moses inside the tent of meeting. So boom, it's kind of like a meta story happening, and it just doesn't tell you that it's doing that. So that was something pointed out in the Bible Project, where they actually view the whole Torah as one unit, and it's doing a lot of communicating within itself. Super cool stuff. Really helps you understand some of these random off stories that seem like that came out of nowhere. It actually is for a purpose. It's plugging into these other stories because all of these first 5 books of the Bibles work together. So if you did not choose to listen to those episodes from their podcast series, again, they have 9, you could go back and listen to those if you got the free time, or when you do Numbers this next week, I would highly encourage listening to those because it'll help you kind of see the bigger picture. If you're not a podcast person, I bet they have lots more resources online as well, or you could find some videos that also help you out. But they have been by far the best resource, Tim and John, on their podcast for understanding the larger structures, what's going on, what's being communicated, and what they really go for, and what I really like is what was the original intent of the author. That's kind of what they're striving for. How was this understood by the original audience? How is this understood by the disciples and Jesus? How is this understood after Jesus? So they kind of try to approach it in those different areas. The original, how is this earlier Israelites and the people at the time just before Jesus was there, how are they understanding these books? And then you come back later with, okay, and then with Jesus coming, what else is revealed in there? So I think you would really enjoy listening to their stuff. Give them a try if you haven't already. I think I've recommended them every week, but they really help me get excited for the Bible and dig in more. Yeah, I think the one other thing that I got out of Leviticus is just when you stop and kind of look at it you zoom back and you go, okay, I'm trying to picture this is what is required for God to reside with the Israelites. And you're thinking through all these sacrifices that need to be made based off of the behavior people. In order to draw close to God, you have to be holy or clean. You can't approach unclean, and being unclean is not a sin, but you cannot approach God in an unclean state because he is holy. And so just thinking through what would it require out of my life to maintain being clean or getting myself from unclean to clean in order to approach God. And so I think I was struck with that during our worship service that Sunday, and just kind of thinking through like that amount is what is required for me to be drawn close to the presence of God, or should be required. And yet I'm able to just directly come to God through Jesus. And so all of these things that I would have to do in order to draw near, I don't have to do because Jesus took all that on him. And I think it just really moved me, kind of big picture. Now, of course, that doesn't mean every verse in here I'm just like profounded by, but I think that's kind of what I'm leaving Leviticus with, is that profound nature of like, wow, that kind of puts a different picture on my sin and where I fall short and how I'm different from God. So with those few things, hopefully that's kind of what you were picking up on. I'd be curious if you were struggling through Leviticus and you struggled to get anything out of it. maybe trying some of those. I'd be curious if you got something out of this and out of a different way or approach or podcast or video that you'd like to share. Shoot me a message. I would love to learn more, get some more people on my kind of listening, who I want to listen to. So if you got any, let me know. But with that, I am already knee-deep into the book of Numbers, or as the original title in Hebrew was called, Into the Wilderness. So there's a fun fact. They had a different title for that book, Bart Mitbar. But the Greek translations went with Numbers because of the different census that took place. So if you're getting bored by all the numbers of the census, wondering why is this in here, what's this all mean, what's it point to, go check out Bible Project and their series, 9 episodes on the book of Numbers, and you will come out of that learning so much more. And then if you got the time, go back and listen to the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus ones, because excellent as well. Well, okay. I'm hoping that I've still got a few people with me through this challenge. I have so far met all of my goals for each week. I'm hoping to get through this whole year, really diving into the Bible, knowing it a lot more. And I think reading through the first 5 books, while challenging because they're a little bit longer, really sets the groundwork for getting more out of the rest of the Bible, because I know that they all call back to these stories a lot. So I'm really looking forward to how the rest of the year progresses. All righty. Hope you guys are having a good one, and I will catch you on the next episode. Bye.